Hey guys, Tarke here, and I'm going to do a breakdown of the last set of balance changes we received in the beta, and also as a quick heads up, I just uploaded a video covering the new Challenge League, so if you haven't seen that yet, go check it out. So, this patch has been a rather confusing one. Reddit has been pretty upset, there's been quite a few memes, etc. So I'm going to cover the initial blog post they made, then go over some of the changes in Outrage, and then we'll wrap it up with the updated manifesto, because they actually posted an updated, actually we messed up, this is kind of what our thought process was. So we'll get like the full kind of like breadth of the news as it's been. So they've messed with Shock and Chill. Previously, Chill always slowed its target by 30%, and Shock always increased damage by 50%. The amount of cold or lightning damage in the hit that caused the ailment compared to the maximum number of life of the target determined how long they would last. Basically, it always was a 30% slow, it was always a 50% damage increase, and the duration was based on how much damage you did compared to the maximum life of the monster. Right. Chill no longer slows enemies by a fixed amount for a variable duration. Now, Chill will slow enemies for a duration of 4 seconds by an amount based on the cold damage dealt to the enemy. A purely cold hit, which removes 50% of an enemy's life, will slow that enemy by 30% for 4 seconds, scaling linearly down to 0% at no cold damage dealt. This is basically a nerf. So before, it was very difficult to reliably chill bosses for any meaningful duration, but when you did, there was like the full effect kind of happening. Same with Shock. Whereas now what's happening is it's kind of like you can chill everything really easily, except for bosses because they have so much life, meaning that when you do ever manage to like hit them with the proper ailment, you're giving them like a 4% or a 1, like you're just doing such a minimal amount that it's almost not really worth focusing on. And previously you didn't struggle to reliably shock or chill enemies before, and to get the full effect, you need to hit them 50% of your life. And if you already hit it in 50% of their life, the next hit kills it anyway, so who cares if it's slowed or if you're now doing extra damage. You kind of see like the outrage that people kind of have. So, similarly, Shock no longer increases damage taken by enemies by a fixed amount for a variable duration. Now, Shock will apply to enemies for a duration of 4 seconds, and increase the amount of damage the shocked enemy takes based on the lightning damage dealt to the enemy. A purely lightning hit, which removes 50% of an enemy's life, will increase the damage that enemy takes by 50% for 4 seconds. So if you can already hit an enemy for 50% of its life, you can already hit it 50% of its life, you don't need an extra 50% damage. Can you see there's a slight disconnect? I've been wrong before, and I'm the first to admit I'm an idiot. So I just might not be understanding this, but it seems silly. Right. These changes make it easier for builds that focus on bonuses against enemies that are shocked or chilled to use those effects against high life enemies, particularly bosses. So yeah, like if you have to have an enemy chilled or shocked, you can now chill or shock bosses. So you can chill or shock bosses to get the secondary effects, but you're losing the initial effects of the shock and the chill, if that makes sense. These maximum magnitudes for these elements apply even in cases where you have stats that would increase the effect. This means that a player with 100% increased effect of chill will only have to remove 25% of a monster's life, with cold damage to slow them down to the maximum of 30%. So you can ramp it up if you have all of these like increased effects of, meaning you don't have to hit it 50%, but then you need to be investing in all these kind of niche things which people don't really invest into. So yeah. Yes. Hits that would shock or chill for less than 5% of the ailment are ignored. Okay. So if you can only chill it for 4%, it just doesn't happen. Chilled ground or any chill not caused by hits has a slowing effect of 10%, unless otherwise specified. So for example, stuff coming from spell effects, Whispering Ice, kind of that sort of thing. Shocked ground or any shock not caused by a hit increases damage by 20% unless otherwise specified. So for example, Val Lightning Trap. So Val Lightning Trap is only 20%. There will new reminder text, blah, 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 blah. Oh, and another quick note. So just a little quick thing to throw in the bottom there. Power charges now grant 30% critical strike chance per charge, down from 50%, and 4% more spell damage per charge. Frenzy charges now grant 4% more damage with attacks, as opposed to 4% more damage. You can also see these changes in the charge panel of the character panel. So what they've done is they've nerfed power charges, their crit by 20%. They've added 4% spell damage, but they've removed spell damage from frenzies, but frenzies still give you cast speed and attack speed. Agnog, we have a history, but he summarizes it quite well. I wonder how long it took you to make these changes, considering they don't fix any of the problems Chill and Shock already had. Bosses. There is no way an endgame boss will be affected at all by either Chill or Shock now because of the huge discrepancy between boss HP and player damage in 3.0. And this basically means that both Chill and Shock are now completely useless. On another note, good job making Frenzy attack only after literally just announcing the Trap Chest unique Tinker Skin. And you're like, what? What's Tinker Skin? We have a picture of it here. Here. Smooth transition. So they recently announced a bunch of new unique items, and people got pretty excited for this unique because it seems pretty cool. So it gave you some evasion, it gave you some energy shield, gave you some life, gave you cooldown recovery on throwing traps, gave you a 15% chance to gain a frenzy charge when your traps is triggered by an enemy. Damn, that's pretty good, yeah. Wait, hang on. Frenzy charges now grant attack skills. Just what the fuck? I really hope that this isn't someone's diamond supporter unique, because if this was your diamond supporter unique, you would be mildly irritated. Like, if you dropped 2.5k, you'd be slightly irritated on that, but anyway. We're expecting some changes here, but these have been somewhat out of left field. Now, because of that, this is also kind of limiting when it comes to build diversity to some extent. So previously, they've already nerfed crit quite heavily. Like, they've nerfed crit available in places. By further nerfing the amount of crit you can get, it makes it harder for certain builds to go crit. And since power charges are now less attractive to attack-based builds, since they give you less crit, it's just like, it's kind of awkward, and also kind of amusing in the fact that previously, you know, you'd be like, oh, well, you can just do some, like, you can still do some cool non-crit poisony oh, wait, no, never mind. So even for the poison shenanigans, which is terrible, to do that, you have to get perfect agony crit base, and it's all just a bit of a hoo-ha. And frenzies just feel kind of weird now, since they give you cast speed, but don't give you spell damage. And now there was, like, one dude doing a spellcaster raider, he's not doing that anymore. Because these no longer give generic more damage, they only give attack damage. That's quite a big nerf to stuff like Righteous Fire, I would assume. Some of the degen based stuff, I don't know how it will work. But for the things which don't scale with spell damage, they've just lost damage. So Course to Carry would have just lost a bunch of damage, if I'm correct. Like, any Course to Carry build which had Frenzy charges, the Cloud doesn't get affected by attack damage, as far as I'm aware. So yeah, it's just like, it nerfs a bunch of builds and makes certain rooting kind of awkward, but whatever. So here's like a compilation of the other big changes they've made. So let's just kind of go through these. So let's just literally spam click. So basalts are now 15% Physmit. Basalts were particularly powerful. They've kind of across the board been nerfing flasks. So yep, still a good flask. Oh well. Scroll out a little bit. Vessel has been nerfed to only give 10% increased damage taken from the shock, and you've lost the mana leech. Alchemist has had the effect go down a little bit. They have been hitting flasks pretty hard. And then this, they've been messing with the numbers. Basically, they've messed with numbers on a lot of them. The one which really surprises me is Dying Sun. They haven't touched the projectiles. The projectiles is what makes Dying Sun ridiculous. I've been waiting for the projectile nerf. Barrage is like the best single target in the game, or basically the best single target in the game. And I'm just like, when are they nerfing Barrage? I play bow builds. They have to nerf it, right? And they're just not nerfing it. And it's just like, why aren't you nerfing it? And this is a really obvious way of nerfing it. But instead they've gone for the AoE, and AoE is already shit. So it's just like, why didn't you nerf the projectiles, yeah? But yeah, less damages basically throughout. Yeah, you've lost some pen on Wise Oak, it now rolls 10 to 15%. You lost some damage on Witchfire Brew. all of these are still incredibly powerful. You'll still use them. It's just like some of them had some really obvious changes and it just didn't go whatever. There's been some good little memes going on. So you can see the hype of the Harboring League, and then you've seen the changes go down. Power Siphon be like, please, I'm already dead. Why do you keep hurting me? I had to show that. It just really, it popped out to me. I'm waiting for Power Siphon to become good again eventually, but you know, you never know. Wow, that's amazing. So you're saying if I drop a mob to 50% in one hit, it will get shocked and take 50% more damage. What's the fucking point? If I can drop it to 50% in one hit, it's going to die the next hit anyway, which makes shock fucking useless. Again, more people kind of going, there seems to be kind of a running theme here. The Tinker's going to change, and this was another nice little proposed change on how to further improve the build diversity when it came to power charges, but I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Let's come back down here. So they've done some minor lab changes. For jewels, there is now a threshold jewel vendor, which I have a picture of here in Act 5. So when you get to Act 5 for 1 alchemy, you can purchase yourself some threshold jewels. Very nice. Interested to see if this will affect the market of unique Val jewels, because now you have a endless way of just buying jewels to then corrupt. Could potentially be a thing. They've nerfed stuff like sack harvest, so maybe it doesn't really matter that much, but it's just something to maybe think about. There might maybe be some easy gain to be making there. They've nerfed the EK jewel from 10 to 5. The new split arrow jewel, this is what it looks like in action with a bunch of GMP and stuff. I'm not really sure what the purpose of it is. It now makes your stuff shoot in a straight line rather than in a fan. Does anyone know why that would be helpful? I don't. Sure. Yeah. New fire trap jewel, which is you can have up to 1 additional trap placed at a time, and with at least 40 decks, fire trap throws an additional trap, and you can have up to 2 of them. So that's pretty powerful. I'm curious to see how that's going to. I'm assuming that's going to ignore the cooldown, right? So you don't, like, if you have 2 of these equipped, you don't throw 3 and then instantly use up all your charges. So I'm guessing it just basically doubles your damage, which is pretty substantial. Just, you know, just like boom. Fire trap is in a bit of an awkward spot at the moment. Some people are building it around the burn. Some people are building it around initial. Some people are going for ignite still. Ignite's kind of whatever. So it's mostly like an initial / burn build. So interesting. It's an interesting one, and something which, you know, traps still have its weaknesses, but you can get a decent amount of AoE on them. So it seems pretty good. Seems pretty good. Tricks has been buffed, but then also you need to take into account the changes to power and frenzy charges. So now it gives +1 to maximum frenzy charges and maximum power charges, increased damage over time per frenzy charge, increased damage over time per power charge, 15% chance to gain a frenzy charge and a power charge on kill. Basically, Tricks just got injected with extreme steroids, and there will be some interesting discharge builds coming out of this, I'm sure. Really, really nuts. There are a lot of like ascendancies which get charge generation, and it seems kind of crazy that you'd be like, what can we do to? We want to give Tricks a little bit of something, a little bit of juicy juice. Fuck it, just give it all the charge generation and just it's a really nice buff, obviously, but it's just kind of like why? I don't know. It's not very elegant in my mind, and also you need to take into account that you might have lost some DPS scaling from frenzies in the case of something like Corsica, I believe. Don't quote me on that. So you might still have less damage now, since you don't have the generic more damage, because it's more damage versus increased damage. So just take that into account when you suddenly think, oh, my build just got crazy buffed. Maybe not necessarily, but still it's something, I guess. And then there's Assassin. So Assassin's been kind of like the problem child, ever since Ascendancy, and with the whole poison double dipping thing. So they made Dots, then they made Assassin, they made Crit, and then they made Assassin, and then they decided to nerf Crit, then they decided to nerf power charges, then they decided to nerf Assassin Crit. And it's just like, what? Like, at some point you need to just stop killing a thing. So previously you used to get base crit chance per power charge. You now just get maximum 2% crit chance while at max power charges. Now, you only get it while at max power charges. This makes your ramp-up phase a bit more awkward. And this is a very heavy hit for builds which really needed it. For example, stuff which was like very low base crit. The Herald builds spring to mind, Incinerate builds which shouldn't really be crit. Builds which were going crit with very awkward weapons which don't have very high base crit. It's just like, it's a really, really big change, and I would probably be okay with this change if they hadn't also nerfed power charges, and if they hadn't already nerfed the power of crit on items and crit multi in general. So it just seems like how many times you need to nerf it. And they've already nerfed double dipping, which was a big draw towards Assassin. And that's not it, because they've also gone, Badoom! 30% more damage, 30% more damage. This used to be 100% more damage. And obviously 100% more damage is a lot of damage. It's 100% more damage. But then they made dots not really worthwhile. Then they nerfed Perfect Agony. And then they've nerfed this. Most people assumed they nerfed Perfect Agony because it was only good with Assassin. So rather than nerfing Assassin, they nerfed Perfect Agony. But now they've also nerfed Assassin. So it's just like, well, yeah. If you're planning an Assassin build in 3.0, may I recommend not. And yeah, so that's that. Then there's the Harbinger stuff. And yeah. Done a few other things. So, Deadeye, still terrible. Not the Ascendancy changes we were after, I'm afraid. Hyro says hello. But, yeah. So, that's that. Fun fact also, considering this only gives you the 2% max crit now at maximum power charges, you would probably most likely just go, like, Scion Assassin now, instead of just going Assassin. Since you can take 1.5% crit all the time and a bunch of multi, and then combo that with something else, which is probably going to be more powerful than what's left of Assassin. They made this to get back on track. So to bring the energy back up, there's a common misconception in the community that our balanced team doesn't play Path of Exile. They actually do play it a whole lot. We have people with level 100 hardcore characters, multiple famous community members who've come to work for us, and you may not even know it. The minimum requirement to join our QA team is 1,000 hours of PoE experience, and we still turn people with that prerequisite away if they're not good enough at the game. Our design, balance, and QA team are experts at Path of Exile. I would not accept any less. They put substantial work into each change, planning out not only what it affects now, but what it affects in the future. These changes are all considered in the big picture of other planned changes. While processing player feedback in preparation for 3.0, we found 4 requests that we could address simultaneously with our proposed charge changes. Nerf total crit chance available. It was getting too close to cap too easily. Nerf the Assassin. This was frequently requested. Provide more uses for power charges on spellcasters, especially non-crit ones. Make it less mandatory for general damage dealers to invest in frenzy charges. We recently made these changes in the beta and received an immediate negative reaction from a vocal portion of the community. While we firmly stand behind the intention of this change, it's very clear that the community not only misunderstood a lot of the consequences, but also generally didn't like the direction of the change. We make this game for you guys, so if you don't want the change, we aren't going to force it in purely to solve long-term problems. The short-term and build continuity do matter as well. We hope to get feedback from your playtesting in the next few days of the beta, so that we can make a decision this week about whether it remains in this form, is reverted, or is made in another form. We communicated poorly about the changes and their motivation. While we may lament the community misunderstanding of the consequences of the change, it is clearly our fault for confusing the community. While it's been crazily hectic recently, we do need to stop and take the time to more clearly explain what we are testing and why. Almost all of these changes are on beta. Please playtest them and let us know the results of what you find. We'll post again after the weekend with our findings also. Thank you for your time, support, and occasional overreactions. We expect nothing less. Now, this is actually a very mature post from Chris, and I think they did a good job to make it. And I think definitely when it comes to the communication behind the changes, like, another quick note, like, what were they thinking? Just the wording of that. It's just like, oh, by the way, just let me just slip that in there. You know, like, there's a kind of, sometimes the notes come across in such a way that's just kind of like a bit of a fuck you. So I think it's good that they're going, maybe we should kind of explain things. It's like with the whole ES changes. I'm one of the people who thinks the ES change was good. I like the ES change. I think ES is still good. But the way they presented the information caused a lot of, you know, upset. Quite rightly so, because it was very poorly presented. As for whether or not we think these 4 changes are intelligent, so nerfing total crit chance available, I wasn't really hearing that much complaint about crit being too easy, and I would argue that you already made those steps by messing with crit a little bit, because they've already messed with crit a little bit, like when it comes to multi and stuff. You then nerf the crit on the power charges, so that definitely did it, right? And the assassin is so tuned around damage over time and or power charges. By nerfing power charges and making dots mostly shit, I would argue that was really all the changes Assassin needed. I think the main concern people had with Assassin was they didn't want Assassin to be the only way to make poison good, and they didn't want people to have to, they didn't want GG to have to like overly nerf poison and dots in general for the sake of Assassin, right? So they were like, maybe don't, and just tune down Assassin a little bit. Instead, what they did is they went, okay, we've taken that feedback, we've nerfed Perfect Agony, we've made dots shit, we keep nerfing it, and now we've nerfed this. It's like, no. Take some of it back. Pull back from a little bit. You know, it's kind of like, okay, so for example, a good analogy for this, recently, so my haircut got butchered the other day because it was a little too long on the sides. And I said, yo, do you mind just taking a little bit more off the side here? And he said, sure, no worries, mate. And he did a snip, and then he did a snip, and then I lost my fringe. Now, his intent was based on player feedback. The side was a little too long. The problem is he couldn't see the side from the fringe. And I sometimes feel like GGG gets like that, where they hear feedback and they just can't see where the feedback should end, and they just keep on cutting away at the fringe. So hopefully they get some duct tape out and they fix what's left of the hair. And on that, I think we've summarized the changes perfectly. So tell me what you guys think. How would you address these 4 issues if you think these are actually issues? Are you happy with these changes? I like the flask nerfs overall. I think the flask nerfs are good. I think the charge changes are stupid. I think the chill and shock changes are bizarre. But other than that, you know, there's some good. There is some good in here. I don't want to be completely negative. But yes. Harbinger looks really cool anyway, so you've got that to look forward to. I'm Tarke. These are some changes. Let me know what you think about them. And once again, rip fringe. Goodbye.